A tacky residue was painted across her face where the stream of tears had dried. She had fallen asleep crying at Karen's side. Cassandra had found Karen holed up in an empty stable pen, crying alone in the dark. There was nothing unusual about this dismay to Cassandra. Too often she had herself wrestled with her own turmoil in the empty darkness. This pain, at least, Cassandra and Karen shared. Draco was perhaps not always in attendance, but his was a presence always missed. Few knew him that intimately. Karen would have none of Cassandra's comfort, though. She pushed the princess off twice before erupting with a barrage of insults. Karen wrestled to pin Draco's death on Cassandra, but could not execute the charge. The cruelty of her words was unlike anything Cassandra had heard previously. Words could only be spoken in life, though, and failed to hurt as much as the silence in Draco's death. The release of Karen's bridled emotions and mourning seemed to break her even more than she was prepared for. The swarming regrets tackled her, and she tripped backward and choked on her tears. Karen gathered her fragmented self, soiled in sorrows and seeping with apologies, to weep on Cassandra's shoulder. They sailed to sleep on a sea of tears, with whispered confessions as the wind at their back. It was early in the morning. The sun was just breaking on the horizon, burning off any sleep remnant in Cassandra. Her head was still pillowed on her wrist when she opened her eyes to find Karen still slumbering before her, their fingers still loosely braided together. Cassandra pushed herself off of the hay piled in the pen and brushed off the dry stalks as she stood. The night had drunk all of the heat from the previous day, and the dew splashed on every blade of grass seeped through her shoes. The bustle of the previous day was gone as well. Every brownie hut slept under the white blanket of an eerie morning fog. A few sleepless, anxious brownies labored on the far slope, but seemed somehow removed from the quiet panorama. Only one other seemed conscious just then. Further up the hill, Nasu had seated himself on a rock. The black silk of his cloak bled across the grass, all of its life and color seeming to die in the folds. He stared down the valley, taking in the same panorama as she. Then he turned to look at her. She approached. "Karen is hurt." "I know," Nasu said. "Why did you not tell me Draco was dead?" "I did not want you to get hurt. I tried to spare you last night even, but they would not obey. We will leave for Callus tomorrow. Your mother does not know yet. Can you understand that I am only trying to protect her? Do you have any regard left for the quiet that I have tried to serve the daughters of Hexen?" Nasu turned away to soak in more of the sunlit panorama. "Perhaps not last night. Watching Karen collapse like she did, though. We hurt together. I carried hers but kept mine. I had to. So do you," Cassandra finished, her head bowed, compliant. This drew Nasu's cocked curiosity. "Your Highness," Nasu began oddly, "I still do not know what happened that day. Perhaps I was harsh." Nasu neared an apology, but turned his conversation away. "What has happened has put us all at great risk, and we are not safe yet. What happened on the night of Detutal?" I found a note folded artistically on my table. I thought it was from Terracon or my mother. After reading it, I was shaken to the ground and consumed with fever. Terracon tried to rescue me, but there was nothing he could do. When I woke, I found myself bound in Orcon's cuffs. "And you broke free?" "Yes. Using black magic?" Cassandra could conjure the specter of the Tawesh, could will and personify the burden of the curse, but she could not lift her head to answer the vizier. "Cassandra," Nasu pressed, the patience of his near apology fading, "this is not about you, but you are making yourself an obstruction to my target. I will not beg, but consider if whatever you are defending is worth the cost of your nation. Draco, your mother, Karen, these are the cost of privilege. Do not squander them." Domara. The confession bled from her tongue, leaving only the foul taste of guilt when she finished. "When I was very young, I escaped to Castle Osmara, to Runa, and then to the countryside. I found the ruins of a stone arch beside a dirt road, and curious about the tales of the wars, I explored the field. I found a mirror. I was lost for days in Castle Domara. When I saw how panicked you and my mother were when I returned, I knew that I could never let you know what had happened. I did not regret it enough not to go back. I found a book in Castle Domara. It might be in my room or in Ramsay's saddlebag. I did not get a chance to grab it after I returned that night. I only had one chance to look through it, and it was by pure luck that I remembered the charm that night in Castle Umsa. You recited a charm? It was in the old language. I have no idea what it means. It broke the vambraces? That is what Orkan said. I did not know that it worked until Terrakan woke me later. Let me see them, Nesu commanded, stretching out an expectant hand to her. Show me the cuffs of Orkan. Cassandra stepped closer to present her wrists. Nesu took her hands in a way that seemed to assert control of her arms. He turned her wrists back and forth to examine the braces. To presume that a comparison could be made would be an affront to their very existence. They had no equal. Nesu could only gauge them against his knowledge of metallurgy and craftsmanship, a store of wealth that, if its mere comprehension were possible, would incite envy. It was, however, admittedly limited, and this piece lay far beyond his expertise. The pair of vambraces were perfectly symmetrical, each crafted from a sheet of smelted mineral with an auric luster. The repetitive crescent relief correlated with no specific familiar cultural symbol, and was so finely rendered that Nesu's eye could not determine the use of a single tool. They are held closed by mere latches, Cassandra could hear Nesu mumble, and inquired of himself, how should these render captive? Cassandra found his tone derisive, but did not want to foster bitterness between them again. Orkan did not want them, did he? They would make a marvelous study. Lord Orkan has yet to state his claim, Cassandra interrupted defensively. She wanted to keep them. Perhaps they would be of more use to Nesu than to either Orkan or her, but after what had happened, she could not part with them. They are broken, and of no use any longer, Nesu said plainly. She could not claim them either. I should see if Orkan will take them back. Disappointment scowled Nesu's face, but he did not argue as Cassandra left him on the hilltop rock. Orkan hooted in an attempt to suppress his thunderous laughter. He sat reclined on his hands within the shadow of Rusty's cobalt tent, caught between distraction and ecstasy. Rusty sat on his lap, the coarse toe pads of her hind paw pressed against the inside of his thigh, prying apart his knees. She scrawled her hand across his stomach, lacing her fingers in the hairs and tracing her knuckles along muscular contours that faded as they tucked deeper under his belly. Her tail, laid over his shoulder, pulled up his neck and teased his cheek affectionately toward her kiss. Orkan Karlesh Rusty, she whispered against his face. Orkan Karlesh Rusty. Orkan was torn between her tail dragging him up and her hands sinking down, and from the rift between poured satisfactory sensations that she wielded against him with her narcotic touch. She lifted his hand to her back, inviting him to graze delight from her skin. A flash of daylight from the tent flap being pulled back sent Rusty ducking beneath and behind Orkan's arm, and startled him out of her intoxicating caress. The silhouette that broke the light was Cassandra. Rusty, where may I find... Cassandra lifted her gaze, then fell back a step startled. Lord Orkan, might I speak with you? Of course, child, Orkan rumbled. He petted Rusty to curl her back to sleep, then rose to meet the princess. They walked along the craggy ridge with its sweeping panorama of the valley below. I am sorry to disturb my Tau Esh, but I needed to talk with you about your cuffs. He rumbled, but Cassandra could not tell if the subject was in fact disturbing, or if he simply meant for her to proceed. How did Setwa come to possess your cuffs? Orkan rumbled again, then spoke, his voice commanding the same resonance as of the still before a storm. Yesterday, when you came to me in Rusty's tent, you said that you understood the void that is the demon's desert. Still, there are details in the void that few understand, concepts that are hard to grasp, and others that have yet to be identified. They, the yet unnamed, and we, the named, coexist. For some, The only separation is sequence. Tell me, Cassandra, from black magic is all life sprung. In a time before time, in a space before place, when the world was nothing, there was wanting, and the wanting of nothing was something, and so it came to be. With being, nothing was lost, and everything was found. Everything was being. We are that being. It coexists with us now as much as you do then. The Taoish created the moment you destroyed my cuffs, and created the moment I would scorn the Taoish, and created the moment that it punished me by having my cuffs destroyed. Everything is simultaneous, including the creation of sequence. Yet only after the creation of sequence can an after exist. I can still see the creation of sequence, can still touch it. In the sequence of time, I could never return to the arms of the Taoish. Only before the sequence could I return to the moment when I scorned it. Black magic used sequence to keep me from my cuffs. If I would, I could retract my scorn. Black magic would not punish me by having my cuffs destroyed, by letting you destroy my cuffs, and you might still be imprisoned in Castle Umsa, Tarakon's dead body at your side. Worse still, I might be imprisoned in immaculate cuffs like my brethren. I could not say how Sedwa came to the cuffs. It is a mystery of sequence. I will not dwell longer outside of sequence. I submit to it, and I have been grateful since sequence has begun that the Taoish would grant me knowledge of the moment my cuffs would be broken. Cassandra had hoped that her curiosity would be quelled, but instead she found it inspired. You knew that I had them? Why did you not take them off of me? I wanted to see you take them off. It was part of the reason I visited you when you were so young, to see you before you wore them. Then there was that moment you walked into my tent, and I figured you might not have realized the significance of what you had done. You could not begin to imagine my surprise when you began to undress them before my very eyes. Do you want them? I asked you before, my lord, but you have not answered me. They are not mine. Black magic took them from me. Black magic gave them to you, and you destroyed them. As far as I am concerned, they belong to you. They have always belonged to you. Cassandra smiled. I'm starting to like them more and more. They remind me. They remind me too, daughter of Nier.